Do you know how to build quests that put your players in the driver's seat? Well, we're going to talk about that today, including the 5 elements that you need to structure a decent quest. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Dungeon Brew.
Welcome back everyone to Dungeon Brew, and welcome back to our series on collaborative storytelling. Today we're going to be talking about quest structure. How do we build quests so that it reflects a thriving, alive world that is responsive to player choices, instead of just having these quests that feel like it's a list of objectives to do? Because I don't know about you, but I kind of hate it when I have to go fetch a thing or drop a thing off or go kill 10 pigs in a field, and it doesn't really seem to have any purpose behind what it is that I'm doing. So we're going to talk about how to make these quests meaningful, how to structure them, and again, having them be responsive to your players. So I'm going to start off by talking about what I think is probably the most simple way of starting to structure quests, which is utilizing a flowchart. Now, before you get all bent out of shape about having to do paperwork, this is about flexibility, not restrictions. It's about having a way to track quests and what's going on based on player choices and knowing what the different options look like. I mean, think about Skyrim and the way that it's designed. You get a quest like stop the bandit in the mountain, and that's your starting point. And then the players have a few choices from there. They can either kill the bandit, they can work with the bandit to extort money from the locals, or maybe they can convince the bandit to move to another area where he won't cause trouble. No matter what they choose, they should be able to loop back into the story. And that's what a flowchart allows you to do. It's a way to see how any choice they choose can then loop back into the story. Maybe they return to the quest giver and they lie about how they responded to the bandit or what they did with the bandit. Maybe they find out later that the bandit double-crossed them. Maybe their decision shifts in a completely unexpected way. But in any case, this allows player agency to remain intact in your story with the quest that you developed, but it allows the game also not to be broken. So you can let the players make any choice and keep the game moving forward. Before I dive into the 5 elements of quest structure, I do want to talk about the purpose of a quest, why it may have been developed to begin with, because personally, I'm a big guy that's all about the why something is being done. So here are some reasons why you may have developed a quest or what the purpose is behind that quest. The first purpose for a quest may be story progression. Quests are oftentimes a core mechanism for advancing the plot. That's why we probably use them the most often. They help guide the players through the world and give them direction, often revealing some key elements of the story, such as the motivation of the villains or the background of important characters. You may also build a quest specifically for player agency. Oftentimes they can offer the players the chance to make some meaningful choices, and it provides them some different paths and outcomes and consequences. It helps them influence the world and the fate of their characters. This sense of agency is really important to help them stay engaged within the entire experience of the TTRPG. Then you have ones for character development. Now this may be personal to me, but I really like creating quests that are specific about the characters and their backstories that they developed before we started the game. So this helps me not only help the characters grow mechanically, like leveling up and gaining new abilities, but also narratively. They can form new relationships or uncover some personal story arcs that are related again to those backstories. You may also create a quest just for world building. This allows the game master to really just kind of expand on the lore in the world itself, and it can introduce some new factions and settings and NPCs and events that make the world feel really enriched and larger than life. And this helps the players feel like they're part of this living, breathing world that responds to their actions. The quest purpose might also just be to provide a challenge to your players. We've all heard that saying that everything I learned about life, I learned by playing D&D. Well, sometimes I just like to present a challenge to my players through combat or puzzles, exploration, or social interactions, something that is going to challenge them to keep the game exciting and engaging. Then you might create a quest for the theme or mood. Sometimes this helps just reinforce the atmosphere of the game. For example, I like dark fantasy and horror themed games, so I might create a quest that just really puts in this intensity for survival and shows you how dangerous that world is to set the tone for the type of adventure that players are going to experience, or maybe just to remind them what type of game they're really playing. You may also create quests for simple reward and motivation for the player characters. Sometimes they need additional materials like treasure or magic items, or maybe they need intangible rewards such as reputation or favor from powerful figures. You can create quests specifically for those outcomes. And lastly, you may create a quest just to foster some collaboration among your players. I do this especially early in the game so they can learn what their abilities are, how to utilize them, how to work together to overcome specific challenges that they may find again later on in the game. As you're thinking about these 8 different types of purposes behind a quest, I do want to say just a little something about the quest itself and the environment. You have to remember that quests themselves do not exist inside of a vacuum. The key principle behind TTRPGs is that the environment should shape the quest, not the other way around. So if you are sending your players into a cramped dungeon, that should probably force some survival and maybe even some puzzle solving. If you're going into a sprawling city, on the other hand, then that's probably going to lead to some political intrigue and perhaps some faction-based quests that exist there. I like to think of like Mass Effect's Scan the Keepers quest that they had. It's really simple, but it serves a larger purpose. It teaches players about the Citadel and simply kind of encourages them to do some exploration. Your quest should do the same thing. It should pull the players deeper into the world based on the structure of the quest or the goal that they're trying to overcome. So let's say that a town has a blacksmith and they ask the player to go get some rare materials from a nearby mountain pass. It sounds really simple, right? But when they get there, maybe they discover that the road is controlled by bandits, and now you've taken a basic fetch quest and you've turned it into a moral and tactical decision. Do they fight? Do they negotiate? Do they find another way? It brings a lot more depth to the world and the things that are occurring within that region. Alright, we have established that different quests have different narrative and gameplay purposes. Now let's talk about the 5 essential components you need in the framework of quest development to make it a unique experience. The first one is your quest action. This is different than the goal. This is the mechanical thing that needs to happen in order to complete the quest. So it could be combat, could be puzzles, it could be being stealthy, diplomacy, exploration. It's whatever specifically needs to happen. So maybe a heist requires some stealth and strategy, where a revenge mission is a little bit more combat focused. I like to offer a couple of options in terms of how the action can play out for my players so that they have a variety of different consequences of what might come from the quest they're engaging in. Great example of this, John had us do a heist once. He gave us the option to either be stealthy and use some strategy or to go in guns a-blazing. We chose the latter. It didn't end well, but he gave us some different options on how we could engage in the quest action. The second element is your quest objective. This is the goal of your quest, and there's a lot of common objectives that you see that come up in TTRPGs. It could be a rescue mission, an assassination, item collection, maybe escorting NPCs, or even solving a mystery. The objective does have a direct influence on what action the players may choose to utilize, so maybe a rescue quest will lead them into a dungeon where they have to engage in particular behaviors in order to accomplish that goal, whereas a mystery quest might require them to go around and have some exploration and some dialogue back and forth to uncover certain clues from multiple sources in order to solve that quest. But the objective is the second thing you want to consider. What is it that they're trying to accomplish? Our third element is quest structure, and this is something that we really kind of dived into deep in the last video, where we're determining how the story is going to unfold. In this case, how is the quest going to unfold? Is it going to be linear, where players are following a very set, structured, straightforward path? Is it going to be branching, where maybe their choices lead to different outcomes depending on how they handle the action in fulfilling the objective? Or you may have a nested structure. This is where you have multiple smaller quests that kind of contribute to a larger goal. It could be in regards to the overall campaign, but in a nested structure, you could have a quest where maybe players have to get several different ancient artifacts from 3 different temples, and then they have to take those and use them to unlock a final challenge or a final room to fight a BBEG. So in any case, you're going to want to decide, what does the structure look like for this quest? Do I want it to be kind of straightforward? Do I want to have it have some branching off pieces to it, or is it going to be nested in nature? And that pulls us right into the fourth option, which is the superstructure. Now, this is simply just seeing whether or not you want that quest to interconnect in the larger game world or is it just going to be some sort of standalone side adventure? So for me, I personally love this. Like, I love making a quest appear to be a side quest where it doesn't have a whole lot of impact on the larger storyline, but then later on finding that all the things that they were doing along the way did impact their story in some way, shape, or form. It kind of fits into the larger narrative arc in some way. So maybe you have a faction-based quest line in a city that involves a lot of several quests that gradually start to change the city's politics or the way that the faction is perceived, or maybe it's pushing them into power where the players thought they were just doing simple fetch and quest things to get coin, but they were actually maybe even aiding the enemy. And then that brings us full circle back around with the fifth element for the quest purpose. So this is what we just talked about a little bit ago in regards to the underlying reason that the quest exists in the first place. Some quests are purely for tutorial purposes or for collaborative purposes. You know, maybe you're just trying to introduce some new mechanics that they're going to need later on in the game for some new idea that you're developing. Others may exist to deepen the lore. Some are meant for character progression. Whatever the case may be, know what the purpose is behind that and why you developed that quest. But understanding these layers and these 5 different elements for creating a quest allows you to create a meaningful quest for your players so that they just don't feel like you have filler content that's there. Instead of just saying, hey, we're going to go and kill 10 goblins, you're able to structure an encounter so the goblins maybe are raiding villages nightly, and it's forcing the players to go out and investigate and plan and engage strategically to stop the goblin threat instead of just murdering 10 goblins out there to get a bounty from the local innkeeper. Alright, so this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. What happens after the quest? What do you do once the quest is complete? Well, that is having the world react to whatever the choices are that the players made. We go back to our bandit example at the very beginning. Let's say the players did go ahead and kill the bandit in that quest. Maybe they now have the brothers hunting them down for that action that they engaged in. What if the players chose to let the bandit go? Did you have some sort of contingency that this bandit can show up again later on down the road? Maybe he's now running a bigger operation and has allowed himself to become quite powerful and a real threat to the players because they let him go. Maybe they chose to work with him, and this could make him become a useful contact to them, or maybe even a liability. You know, in video games we see this all the time where these consequences are usually scripted in some way based on what it is that you choose to do. But in a tabletop role-playing game, it's a lot of fun because you get to make these moments organic. You let the players' past decisions come back to haunt them or reward them. Okay, so this video is going on a bit longer than intended, but I have to talk about challenge scaling and player progression. The quest should match that player progression. As your players grow stronger, this should be true for the challenges that you presented to them as well, especially if it's going to be along the same quest line. And this means more than just bigger monsters. You want to have deeper dilemmas, you want to have tougher choices, you want to have evolving threats. One of the best models for this is what I like to call Arrowhead Questing. You want to picture an inverted pyramid. You start with lots of smaller, easier encounters, and then as you progress, those enemies become fewer but stronger, leading to this intense final showdown, kind of leading up to this climatic moment. And this structure keeps the tensions really high, and it rewards incredibly smart play. So Arrowhead Questing is something that's been talked about before in other circles, but it's used to teach players new mechanics, new story elements. A good example of this is like in Fallout 3's Blood Ties quest, where what starts as a simple delivery leads to uncovering like this hidden cult that's forcing these moral choices that kind of ripple throughout the entire game. So at the end of the day, with all of the videos in this, we're talking about how to be collaborative in your storytelling with players, letting them have some actions that have a real impact on the world, that make it feel real, that make their choices feel meaningful, and you're able to use this framework that keeps the story moving overall. So using flowcharts is really helpful, tying your quest back to the world is helpful, and making sure that your actions have consequences. As always, I think it's really important to make sure that your world is reacting to your players and that they can see that their choices are shaping the world around them. I hope this has been helpful for you. Please drop a comment, subscribe, and go check out our Patreon, where we are regularly creating tools, tips, and resources for game masters like you. I'll talk to y'all next time.
Dungeon